There's a shipping clerk in Antwerp in 1900 named Edmund Morel, and his job is about as unglamorous as jobs get. He sits with cargo manifests all day, tracking what goes in and out on one specific shipping route, back and forth between Belgium and a place called the Congo Free State. Nobody hires a clerk expecting him to change history. He's just supposed to make the numbers match.
And one day, they don't. The ships heading out to the Congo are packed with rifles, ammunition, and iron chains. The ships coming back are packed with rubber and ivory, more of it than he's ever seen come through that port. In an actual trade relationship, you send goods, you get goods back, cloth, tools, things people would choose to sell. There's none of that here. Guns go in, rubber comes out. Nothing in between. Morel isn't a historian or a diplomat. He's a numbers guy, and the numbers are telling him something specific. Whatever's happening on the other end of that shipping line, it isn't commerce. Somebody isn't getting paid for that rubber. Somebody's getting a rifle pointed at them instead. Here's the part that took Morel years to fully piece together, and it's the part most people never learn in school. The Congo Free State wasn't a colony of Belgium. Belgium, the country, the government, didn't even want it at first. This was the personal property of one man. King Leopold II, monarch of Belgium, owned this stretch of Central Africa roughly the same way you'd own a house. Not administered, owned. The profits went into his own accounts, not the Belgian treasury.
He secured this arrangement at a conference in Berlin in the winter of 1884 into 1885, where the major European powers sat down and agreed on rules for dividing up Africa without fighting each other over it. Leopold showed up with a pitch. Let me run this territory as a humanitarian project, stamping out the Arab slave trade, opening Central Africa to free trade and civilization. The other powers signed off. The Congo Free State was born in 1885, roughly the size of Western Europe, run by a king who never once set foot there in his entire life.
So here's the mechanism, and I want to walk through it plainly, because the plain version is worse than any dramatized one. By the 1890s, the world suddenly needs enormous amounts of rubber, thanks to a new invention called the pneumatic tire, and bicycles and eventually automobiles taking off. Congo happens to sit on some of the richest wild rubber vine forests anywhere. Leopold's government in the territory, which was really a private armed force called the Force Publique, assigned every village a rubber quota. Not please gather what you can, a fixed weight, a deadline, no negotiation.
If a village fell short, the response was brutal. Women and children were taken hostage until the quota was met. Villages that resisted were burned. And soldiers were required to account for every bullet they fired, so they wouldn't just be shooting for sport, by bringing back a severed human hand as proof. That detail is the reason this got exposed at all. Because when missionaries started photographing it and sending the pictures back to Europe, nobody could argue with a photograph.
Now, how big was this, actually? Nobody has a clean number, and that's honestly part of the story too. Estimates for how many people died under Leopold's rule range from around 1 million on the low end up to 15 million on the high end, with a lot of historians landing somewhere near 10. That's not historians being sloppy with math. There was no reliable census of Congo before any of this started, and diseases like smallpox and sleeping sickness were killing huge numbers of people at the same time as the violence, which makes it genuinely hard to draw a clean line between one cause of death and another. What almost nobody disputes is the trend line. Entire regions saw their populations cut roughly in half over about 20 years. 20 years. That's inside one person's working life. And here's the part that's almost darkly funny in the worst possible way. This entire system ran under the banner of ending slavery and bringing civilization. That was the actual pitch Leopold made to the world. And the world bought it. What he built instead was a forced labor economy, enforced by hostage-taking and mutilation, with a king's signature on the paperwork instead of a slave trader's. Before you assume this required some evil genius master plan, it mostly didn't. It ran on ordinary incentives. Quotas got met because meeting them kept soldiers paid and administrators employed. And almost nobody up the chain wanted to ask too many questions about how.
Fast forward more than a century, and that same stretch of Central Africa, now the Democratic Republic of Congo, sits on more than half the world's cobalt. That's the mineral running your phone battery and a lot of electric car batteries right now. A meaningful share of that cobalt still comes out of artisanal mines dug by hand, and labor investigators have documented children as young as 9 working those sites. Most of the actual mining output today is controlled by companies with Chinese ownership, and the raw cobalt mostly leaves the country to be refined somewhere else, which is where the real value gets added, and where most of the profit actually lands.
I'm not going to tell you that Tesla or Apple or the Congolese government are running some 21st century version of the force publique, because they're not, and forcing that comparison would be dishonest. The politics are completely different. DRC is its own sovereign, independent government now, with corruption problems that are genuinely homegrown, not imposed from outside.
But the underlying shape is hard to miss. A resource-rich part of Congo, a supply chain engineered to move raw material out fast and cheap. Very little of the profit staying with the people doing the actual digging. That shape has outlasted the king who first built it by more than 100 years, and it's still worth watching for, under whatever name it's wearing this decade.
Morel, for what it's worth, never let it go. He quit the shipping job, started his own newspaper, and spent close to a decade building what historians now call the first organized international human rights campaign, before that phrase even existed. He teamed up with a British diplomat named Roger Casement, whose 1904 report to the British Parliament put actual names, dates, and locations on what had until then been rumors nobody could confirm. Together, they got Mark Twain and Arthur Conan Doyle involved, and enough of the British public angry enough that by 1908, the Belgian government finally forced Leopold to give up his private colony. He was compensated for it, more than 45 million francs, and died the following year, still one of the richest men in Europe.
There's a statue of Leopold II on horseback in Brussels, put up in 1926, years after he was gone. It's still standing, though it's been vandalized more than once in recent years by people who think it shouldn't be. And honestly, that's the closest thing to an ending this story has, because there isn't a tidy one. A clerk who couldn't stop staring at a ledger helped end one man's personal ownership of one country. He didn't end the pattern sitting underneath it. That part's still yours to notice. Every time you see raw material leaving somewhere poor and coming back as a finished product somewhere rich, wrapped in a good enough story that you almost forget to ask where it actually came from.